Hey everybody, and welcome to Zoo Tour Matters. Today we will be exploring Peak Wildlife Park. Situated in around 75 acres, Peak opened in 2015, so is a relatively new zoo, although it did replace Blackbrook Zoo, which unfortunately went into administration in 2014. Blackbrook was a specialised collection, pretty much housed just birds, whereas Peak is a bit more generalised. It's very heavy on mammals, but does also have a couple of bird species as well. So come and join me at this amazing zoo and see what we can find. The zoo itself is essentially split into two parts, a right side and a left side, with a centralised hub. We are going to start on the right hand side of the zoo, and our first enclosure that we arrive to is a really nice bush dog enclosure. We've been lucky enough on the channel to see several really decent bush dog enclosures at different collections, and this one is definitely up there as well. You can see a centralised pool in the middle, which they were sort of utilising. They are semi-aquatic after all and do have partially webbed feet. A nice little pack here. I believe there were 7 or 8 individuals all together. Very active, especially early in the morning. You can see these guys coming really close down to the viewing windows. There's several viewing locations dotted around the enclosure. You can see them at a glass fronted window before moving around. I do have to say that the signage at the zoo, as you can see some examples of here, is really good, really child friendly and really informative. Moving down, we come to an enclosure that's been repurposed since my last visit. This was formerly home to the Asian short-clawed otters, but is now home to the zoo's pair of dwarf mongoose. Quite nice to see dwarf mongoose. Yellow mongoose seem to be the most popular in zoos at the moment, so it's quite nice to see dwarf mongoose, smallest of the mongoose species. Speaking of mongoose, we move next on to the zoo classic meerkats. This enclosure was okay. I wouldn't rate it too highly on the list of meerkat enclosures I've seen, especially having recently seen the incredible whip-snade meerkat enclosure. However, plenty of rocks, plenty of logs. This creates natural foraging for the meerkats. Woodlice, various bugs, native bugs and insects will crawl amongst these. Great for the meerkats to hunt those. Yes, this is a small deck chair that meerkat is in. Why? I'm not too sure, but there we go. Next door we have a small paddock enclosure. This is for African spurred tortoise or sulcata tortoise. Just a single male housed at the zoo. I believe his name is Jack. You're about to see a really brilliant sign I spotted outside his enclosure. Here it talks about Jack the weather tortoise. Really nice to see zoos with a good sense of humour. Next, we move round to a Humboldt penguin enclosure. Now, on first glance, it doesn't actually seem that large, but from the multiple viewing points, it quickly becomes apparent that it is quite a sizable exhibit. Here's the first viewing point. You can then move up a elevated walkway, and that gives you a look down on a secondary pool. We saw the first pool a moment ago with the penguins around. This pool is up a ramp. There is actually indoor viewing for this pool as well. You can come back down the ramp and go underneath and see the penguins in this secondary pool here. There are around 25 penguins housed at the zoo altogether. Not many of them really were utilising the pools. A lot of them on the sort of beach area, some in the nesting areas as well. Although I did get some quite close views of the penguins themselves, chilling out more than anything. Now, this enclosure is actually a walkthrough enclosure. Peak is very heavy on walkthrough exhibits, as you'll see throughout the tour, and this is our first one. Now, all of this is part of the exhibit. The penguins do have access to this, I'm not sure how much of this grassy area they utilise, rather staying down on the pools and the sort of sandy beach area, but you can walk through and get quite close to the penguins should they choose to come up to those areas. Next we head to a very large sika deer enclosure. This is Vietnamese or Indo-Chinese sika deer. You can actually purchase animal food to feed the deers especially. They are relatively friendly. A couple of the deer coming very close, feeding from some of the children that had purchased some food. You can see a bit of a pool, a bit of a lake in the enclosure, unfortunately dried out due to all the hot weather in the UK, but when the rain comes back that will refill. Sika deer do use water a lot, they are very strong swimmers indeed. Next we move round to a really large red panda enclosure. Lots of trees, climbing options, really well planted as well. Some zoos will allow pandas the chance to go up trees, other zoos don't and will place tree guards to stop the pandas. This might be of recommendation of tree surgeons, old limbs of trees, even the chance of a tree coming down. I know of one zoo where it was a case of a panda would go up and then not come down for food or anything. In this case, Peak allowed the pandas the chance to go up the trees, which is nice to see. I got quite lucky, saw this panda come from asleep down the tree, really showing that climbing ability beautifully, presenting itself nicely. Sometimes you don't always see active pandas. Got quite lucky on this occasion. Following the Asian theme with the sika deer and the pandas, we now find some Asian short-clawed otters. This is a relatively new exhibit. As mentioned earlier, the otter were previously housed where the dwarf mongoose were. This exhibit massively better for the otters. A large pool, tons of land, tons of vegetation. Active just like the red pandas were. The zoo houses, I believe, 5 females. Here you can see them coming out that pool, making their way up into their house. Next we find something quite unique, something you don't see at many zoos at all, and that is the half-maned zebra. A unique subspecies of zebra. This is actually a subspecies of the plain zebra, and the clue is in the title. They have very short to non-existent manes. These guys just had a very fine one, you can just about see it. Next we move on to undoubtedly the main event of the zoo, the polar bears. The zoo currently holds 2 males, and I remember when they announced that they were bringing in polar bear in, how surprised I was. The reason being, for the most part the zoo holds small mammal species, small carnivores, a couple of mid-sized mammals, so to make that jump to then hold the largest carnivore species there is was a real surprise. Normally zoos will work up to something like this, so it was definitely an eye-opener to see the Peak were going straight in there with these guys. That isn't a knock at the zoo, and they are doing an incredible job with their bears. The enclosure is very Yorkshire-like for those that have seen the polar bear exhibits at Yorkshire Wildlife Park. I imagine that on the most part was probably their blueprint. There are 2 main exhibits that are linked by a small indoor area. The bears do have access to both sides, although they can be shut onto one if keepers need to service or work on anything on the other side. Obviously known for the Arctic snow, they are also found on the tundra regions, which the zoo do a really good job of trying to make that as naturalistic looking as possible. Again, some examples of some brilliant signage dotted around the zoo, including on several enclosures these signs which really highlight the individual animals, the name, where they're from, and a little bit of background info, which I was a big fan of. Carrying on the Arctic theme, we find an enclosure for Arctic foxes. The zoo currently hold 3 foxes. Being as it's in the summer, they are in their summer coats of that black. This individual was actually rubbing and scratching up against the keeper gate. Probably losing a little bit of that last winter coat, the white and the grey fur. We now find our second walkthrough exhibit. This was the original red-necked wallaby walkthrough. Obviously it's still in place, but as you'll see later, there has been a new development and a much larger red-necked wallaby walkthrough is in the other side, the second half of the zoo. Plenty of wallabies in this exhibit. Again, you can get quite close. You can use some of that food that you can purchase and feed the wallabies. Also, if the wallabies are brave enough. Next door, we have another walkthrough. This one is for lemurs. The zoo originally had 4 lemur species in here, down to 3 now. There are black lemurs still in the zoo, but they've been moved to a different enclosure ahead of a move to a different collection, which leaves a walkthrough with red-bellied, black and white ruffed and ring-tailed lemur. There's not that many of each, just a single red-bellied, a couple of black and white ruffed, and probably 5 or 6 ring-tailed lemurs altogether. Still, it is a very nice walkthrough. Again, plenty of climbing options, a very large size, a central house which does have viewable windows, so if the lemurs are inside you can still view them whilst you're in the walkthrough. It's quite unusual to see black and white ruff mixed into a mixed species lemur exhibit. They are notoriously the playground bully of the lemur species. There is usually dominance issues when it comes to territory. Being so that this is quite a large space, I imagine that the territorial issues are kept down to a minimum, if at all, which is obviously much more beneficial for all species within this walkthrough. These ringtails making the most of the warm weather, cooling themselves down. Again, really nice signage. This shows all the locations throughout Madagascar that you will find the lemurs. We now move on to the second half of the zoo. This is a slightly smaller half, although it does have several exhibits and walkthroughs. This side of the zoo holds a majority of the zoo's domestic species, such as these giant rabbits, alpacas, sheep and goats. We find this new development, the second of the zoo's wallaby walkthroughs, Wallaby Way. We saw the original one earlier on the other half of the zoo. This one has been built around a central lake, which you walk around the outside of. Plenty of wallabies about. Again, you can feed them, dependent on whether the wallabies want to come up to you and be fed. There is also a single capybara housed here. The zoo holds 2 capybara currently, one in this walkthrough and another mixed in with their tapir. I believe both were originally together, but I believe some dominance issues has caused this separation and caused the split, with them being housed in separate enclosures now. As you'll see, the zoo is really making the most of the capybara boom that's going on in zoos. They are definitely the in animal at the moment. The zoo really capitalising on that with this signage. Another walkthrough, a really interesting walkthrough this one now, for one of our native species, the red squirrel. This is a really nicely planted exhibit, essentially a bit of woodland that's been fenced in for the squirrels. Unfortunately, on this visit, the squirrels were a no-show, hiding away, which was a real shame, considering this is one of our great native species. Coming out of the squirrel walkthrough, you find this large exhibit for Kirk's dik-dik. Now, they were showing nicely, although you did have to spend a little bit of time and be a bit patient to see what is the world's smallest antelope species. The zoo holding a male and a female, making their way through the long grass and the vegetation. We now move on to the final enclosure of this tour. This is now a mixed species exhibit for the capybara and also the zoo's lowland tapir, also known as South American tapir and even Brazilian tapir, as they were only known as when I first started my zookeeping career. The zoo hold a male and a female. They were tucked away under this shelter. Even during a keeper talk, they weren't interested in coming down and getting their browse. They took themselves off. Both capybara and tapir are exceptionally strong swimmers. Much like the bush dogs earlier, capybaras have partially webbed feet. Tapirs have splayed toes to help them in soft mud and also to help them swim. Tapirs will often take to water when predated on by jaguars. They have a very thick neck muscle which stops jaguars biting through that hide and into the skin. This capybara really showing off its swimming credentials, entertaining everyone. And that brings an end to this tour. Thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.